The forest was thicker than memory could accommodate, old-growth trees standing tall and proud, draped in moss, their trunks ancient and grooved with the passage of centuries. Falling leaves muffled the footsteps of anyone brave enough to tread the carpet of gold and rust that lay beneath the dense canopy. In the copper hush of fading afternoon, nature seemed to breathe differently, as if every living thing waited, poised, for something unseen, cautious and wary. Hardly anyone ventured into this part of the Pacific Northwest, not for lack of beauty, but because of stories. Stories that began with panic in a hiker's voice, interrupted radio signals, or the eerie absence of birdsong after sunset. Local legends spoke of shadows that watched from between the trees, of footprints in the mud nearly twice the length of a boot, of guttural sounds echoing through valleys when only the moon watched. Most dismissed such tales as flights of rural fancy, products of overactive imaginations or the hallucinations of exhausted travelers. But some took them seriously, very seriously. Josh never believed in legends, not really. He preferred facts, angles, and measurable evidence. That's why, when his friend arranged a week-long trek through some of the wildest stretches of the forest, Josh packed camera traps and audio recorders alongside his sleeping bag. A rational precaution, he told himself, for cataloging elusive wildlife, not legends. He did not expect to see anything but the usual: deer, perhaps a black bear at a distance, maybe an irritated owl. Shadows stretched in the waning light as Josh made camp upon a small clearing near a cold, gurgling stream. The air was crisp, but heavy with the scent of cedar and decaying leaves. Unpacking, he noticed a silence settling, deeper than earlier in the day. Not a single bird sang, nor did any squirrel chatter. Only the wind whispered between trees, rustling dry leaves on the forest floor. As he fitted his tent poles, a branch snapped somewhere nearby, a sound too deliberate, too heavy for a deer or raccoon. He stopped, listening. The forest took on the peculiar feeling of being observed. His eyes searched between tangled undergrowth and bark, finding nothing but the memory of movement. That night was long, filled with distant cracking wood and the periodic shift of earth that seemed to circle his camp. Each time he drifted towards sleep, a muted shuffle would bring him back to alertness, his heart pounding against his ribs, every sense straining to pierce the darkness beyond his thin vinyl shelter. Yet, morning came, and with it, embers of courage fanned by daylight's warming rays. The sounds of the night were easy to rationalize then. Perhaps it had been the wind or some deer navigating fallen timber. But the footprints could not be explained away. Massive prints, twice the size of his own, pressed deep into the mud where the earth softened near the stream. 5 toes, broad stride, so fresh they had edges as sharp as any impression made moments earlier. He squatted beside them, taking photos, measurements, uncertainty blooming in the chamber of his chest. A cold realization swept over him on the breeze. He was an intruder here. Whatever made these tracks was still close. He pushed onward, aiming to reach the mountain ridge by dusk, searching for cell signal and reassurance. As he moved, the forest seemed to press inward, shadows shifting at the corners of his vision. Twigs snapped behind him, too often and too persistently to be mere coincidence. He called out into the trees, laughter forced, voice echoing falsely cheerful, a challenge to whatever might be following. Cameras set at knee height as he paused, hopeful they might capture what his senses could barely comprehend. He recorded short voice memos, narrating his observations. Day 2. No wildlife, not even birds, unexplainable prints. Could be hoax, though the prints are uncommonly fresh. Feeling watched. By early afternoon, the air grew tense and oppressive, and a low, thrumming growl rolled between tree trunks. Josh froze, heart stuttering, logic fleeing before an instinct older than thought. The growl carried intention. A warning, perhaps. A branch above snapped, dropping a small shower of leaves onto his pack. Again, he saw nothing, but the feeling thickened, an unseen watcher, following, testing. He considered turning back, but the compulsion to find out what stalked him bordered on obsession. He pressed on, nerves fraying as the hours chewed away at his resolve. Food tasted like nothing. Water went down like gravel. Each sound seemed amplified, the crunch of his boots, the snap of twigs, even his own breath. Night fell, and with it, a sense of entrapment. Every part of him screamed that it was not safe to be here, that something bided its time. He tried to listen for reason, for the explanations he always trusted. Perhaps a bear or mountain lion? But bears did not move with such patience, nor did lions. These sounds, the spacing, the cautioned movements, they were mirrors of his own careful steps. As darkness pooled under a starless sky, Josh's hands shook as he erected his tent. He propped up the flashlight and tried to review his findings, but concentration failed him. Every gust of wind, every shift of branch made him look over his shoulder. Sleep was out of the question. The chorus of the night was broken by a sudden, heavy slap against a tree just yards away. He held his breath, heart in his throat. Another, closer this time. He grabbed his knife, silly though it felt, and waited. Silence returned, more suffocating than before. Sometime past midnight, a stench crept into his camp. Wet fur, rotten leaves, and something else. Musky, sickly sweet. He gagged, eyes watering. Something extraordinary was close. Close enough to smell, or to be smelled by. In the early morning haze, he discovered his camp in disarray. Gear had been rifled through, food containers thrown, one camera missing. Heavy footprints circled the site, stopping just short of where he'd lain, unmoving, in terror. The prints vanished into the undergrowth, but the message was clear. He was being toyed with. He debated running, abandoning everything. The nearest trailhead was a full day's hike back, but part of him, stubborn and curious, refused to let go. He set out, clutching his pack close, eyes wider than before, every nerve screaming in protest. The sun was barely above the treetops when the rhythm of pursuit began again. Measured, deliberate, as if the thing stalking him was content to let him know it was there, never directly seen, always just behind. The forest itself pressed against him, closing ranks with every step, a corridor of watchful green. Suddenly, a choked cry cut through the trees. Not animal, too raw, too full of intent. He sprinted, crashing through brush, heedless of the scratches that tore at his skin. Something enormous moved in parallel, just out of sight, its breaths ragged and deep. He stumbled upon a meadow, sunlight spilling over wildflowers, incongruous in the midst of terror. He tried to calm his ragged breath, but then the trees at the meadow's edge quivered. A silhouette loomed, huge, upright, impossibly broad. Matted hair caught the trembling light, and eyes reflected a feral amber. For a brief moment, Josh locked gazes with the legend itself. The thing locals whispered about, the reason his mind had screamed to turn back. Its expression was neither rage nor curiosity. It was cold assessment. Josh did not doubt it could close the distance faster than he could draw breath. Instead, it waited, watching. He raised his hands, not in surrender, but in a silent plea. The figure tilted its head, the weight of its gaze a physical presence. He did not move. Seconds stretched toward infinity. And then, as if bored or satisfied, the creature turned with impossible grace, melting back into the shadows. Josh was rooted to the spot, air burning in his lungs. He did not linger. Gathering what little composure he had, he fled, moving without direction but with a speed only sheer terror can conjure. Every brush of leaves, every errant chirp made him glance back, expecting those eyes to pierce him anew. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsed in a hollow between two ancient cedars, his body racked with silent sobs. Night crept in slowly, shadows lengthening and deepening, but nothing else came. The forest was still, too still, as if whatever power held sway had retreated with the beast. When the first strands of dawn wove through the branches, Josh staggered toward civilization, battered, shaken, every sense tuned for pursuit. But the thing from legend had vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Days later, safe among the rational shapes and sounds of city life, he found that the certainty he'd always trusted had crumbled. The photos on his phone were blurry, the measurements inconclusive. The camera trap, when recovered by park rangers, was smashed and useless. But the memory lived in him, sharper than any evidence could capture. He never went back to those woods. But sometimes, when the wind shifts or the night is thick with the smell of earth and moss, he remembers that feeling, the sense of being watched along ancient primal corridors, a hunted thing, outmatched and outwitted in the world's oldest game. Others might call it madness or superstition, or the trick of a forest at dusk. But Josh knows better. He has seen the line where myth and flesh meet, knows the weight of a predator's gaze, and carries with him forever the memory of being hunted by Bigfoot. And in the end, perhaps that is how legends endure, not only in tracks on the ground or the distant echo of an unidentifiable cry, but in those who walk away from the encounter, changed, marked, forever looking over their shoulder at the place where the wild is still king. If you've ever experienced something strange in the wilderness, an inexplicable sound, a fleeting shadow, or a moment that made you question what you thought you knew, we invite you to share your story in the comments below. By joining the conversation and subscribing, you not only help our community of cryptid enthusiasts grow, but you also contribute to a collective understanding of the mysteries that still linger in the wild corners of our world.